So we are reading Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins. We are on chapter 15, Genius and the Power of Creativity. We are on page 40 of the PDF and 195 of the book.
Creativity and genius are the loci of powerful high energy attractors. No human talents are more germane to the creation of new M fields or the unfoldment of the enfolded universe. In fact, these are the explicit domain of creativity and genius. Yet, these closely allied processes remain shrouded in mystery. There is a paucity of information about the essential nature of either creativity or genius.
So now see, today all growth, all manifestation ultimately has to have creativity. And when you're moving ahead, right, in evolution, genius has to be there. Now he's talking about new M fields. So this is something that Robert Monroe also talks about in his books. The M field is a field which is there in the stratosphere of the earth. And one of the reasons why you meditate very well is because in an aircraft is because the aircraft flies above the M field, right? Now the M field is also created by all our thoughts. So every time you have a thought, it's getting reflected in the stratosphere and coming back, and it's accumulated over there. So that M field is what he's talking about here. Now, whenever something new has to happen, it has to originate in the M field and then it comes down. Okay. So, and again, as we were just discussing with Tantra and the how you chant mantras and all that, we do not know what is there. So over here, he's saying that genius, how does it manifest and how does creativity manifest is shrouded in mystery. We really don't know how it happens. Now, this is something that I experienced very clearly when I did the exploration 27, where you actually go into focus level 27 and discern what is happening. There's a planning center there. There is a creativity center there. There is a healing center there. And when you go into those states of consciousness, when you observe what is happening there, this is exactly what is happening. That basically that creative instinct over there, it's planned and then it's inserted into the mind of people. And that's why you will find that, and we've discussed this before, that many times all over the world, the scientists have started working on the same thing at the same time, because they don't give that thing to one person. They give it to many people to do it at the same time. And then one person actually creates it and patents it and all that stuff starts to happen. Okay. But essentially, any creativity is actually coming as a download and then it gets uploaded. So it's coming from the big guy. The big guy receives it as a download and then it's uploaded into our normal consciousness. And then we take action about doing it. Okay. But no one really knows how it really works.
Human history is the record of man's struggle to comprehend truths which to those of genius appear obvious. Genius is, by definition, a style of consciousness characterized by the ability to access high energy attractor patterns.
So what is this? Anyone who is open, who is operating at that higher state of consciousness can connect to these high attractor fields, which result in innovation, growth, and development, right? So anyone who's an innovator, you will find that they meditate, they go into altered states of consciousness, and they are downloading data. They're connecting with those states of consciousness which are related to the high attractor fields, which are operating in the level of consciousness naturally above 200, maybe above 500 and above 700 also.
It is not a personality characteristic. It is not something that a person has, nor even something that someone is. Those in whom we recognize genius commonly disclaim it. A universal characteristic of genius is humility. The genius has always attributed his insights to some higher influence.
So again, a genius knows that they're going into altered states and getting a download, right? So you will find that most geniuses will be operating out of humility, compassion. Now, if that person is operating out of arrogance, then he is operating at the lower level of consciousness. Now, if you see highly spiritual people also, they'll always have humility and compassion. So they are operating at higher attractor fields and attractor patterns.
The process of animating genius most commonly involves first formulating a question and waiting an indefinite interval for consciousness to work with the problem. Then, suddenly, the answer appears in a flash, in a form which is characteristically non-verbal.
So now, again, most of you who have attended the excursion workshop understand what is being said over here. So when we are using the one breath technique, what are we doing? We are going into an altered state of consciousness. We are posing a question. We are throwing out a question into that expanded state of focus 12. And then we are waiting for an answer. And many times the answer comes in non-verbal form. And that's why we are constantly telling you that when you're going into these altered states, you need to develop your language. And it is your personal language of how you interact and interpret what is coming as information from that expanded state of focus 12, or if now you are going into focus 15 or 21 also, and that download takes place, what does it mean for you at a conscious level, right? So this is exactly what he's saying. The answer appears in a flash, in a form that is characteristically non-verbal. So the answers will always mostly come in non-verbal format, a sense of knowing. Maybe symbolism plays a very big part. You may hear something, you may see something. Okay, you may taste something, you may smell something. So it comes in different ways, the answer.
Great musicians throughout history have stated that they did not plan their music, but rather wrote down what they heard, finished within their own minds.
So again, most of these musicians, they're hearing the music in their head, right? And they're just writing it down, what they've heard. This was also, Beethoven used to do it, Mozart used to do it. All the great musicians used to do that. They used to hear it in their head and they used to just put it down into paper. And they were aware that they are not making it. They are hearing it and then putting it down.
The father of organic chemistry, Kukulé, saw the pattern of the carbon ring organic nucleus in a dream. In an illuminated moment, Einstein had the revolutionary insight, which then took him years to translate into provable mathematics.
So now, again, so theoretical physicists, okay, this is what they're talking about. They see something in their head and they make the theorem in their head and then put it down on paper. Now, even after they put it down on paper, it is not possible to prove the theory, right? Till a theory is not proved, it doesn't become a law. So it remains a theory till it is proved. And certain experiments are done which allow it to say that, yes, this is it. Every time you do the same experiment, you'll get the same result. But these geniuses, they get it in their head and then they put it down.
Indeed, one of the main problems of genius is how to transform that which is perceived in one's private understanding into a visible expression comprehensible to others.
So now this is again something that most of the people who attend the Gateway Voyage or even the other graduate level programs at the Institute, they find it very difficult to put in words what they have experienced in those expanded states. We recently had a Gateway Voyage, and I'm sure that the participants will vouch for it, that it would have been very difficult for them, and some of them actually mentioned it during the program also, that what they experience, they can't convert it into words because there are no words. Our verbal content is not rich enough to be able to explain what has been experienced in those expanded states.
The revelation itself is usually complete and self-explanatory to him who receives it. But to make it so to others may take a lifetime.
So why does it take a lifetime for others? Because they're not operating at that same level of consciousness in which they can receive that information or that particular data. This is again something that Robert Monroe also talks about in his book. He called it the rote. We talked about it before. Resonant, organized thought energy. So you're thrown a rote. Now then you start mulling it and opening up the rote, which comes as a download to you.
Genius thus seems to proceed from sudden revelation rather than conceptualization, but there is an unseen process involved. Although the genius's mind may appear stalled, frustrated with the problem, what it really is doing is preparing the field. There is a struggle with reason which eventually leads, like a Zen koan, to a rational impasse from which the only way forward is by a leap from a lower to a higher attractor energy pattern.
So now what happens? Many times, you have not, it's like a computer. If there are too many programs open, it seems that the computer has stalled, right? Nothing is happening in the computer, but the computer is working in the background. So the same thing happens with genius also. When you're going into these states of consciousness, suddenly you'll get an epiphany and then you can't process it. Okay. So you become like as if you're stunned, you're stuck. So that's why you'll find many spiritualistic people, suddenly you'll find that they're not there. Where they are, you don't know. And then they'll come back, right? So something is being processed in that, in their minds, in their system. Now, again, always, whenever these downloads takes place, it's always going to take you into a higher attractor field. Generally, the download will never pull you down. It is always uplifting in nature.
Attractor energy patterns have harmonics, as do musical tones. The higher frequency, the harmonic. The higher the frequency, the harmonic. The higher the power. What the genius arrives at is a new harmonic. Every advance in human consciousness has come through a leap from a lower attractor pattern to its higher harmonic.
So again, harmonic, what does it mean? That every time you double suppose I have 2 centimeters. So 2 centimeters as a harmonic of 4 centimeters. 4 centimeters as a harmonic of 6 centimeters. And so on and so forth, right? So as we go into higher harmonic fields, we are connecting with higher attractor field patterns. So we are going into higher states of consciousness also. Again, in the scale also, we are raising our level of consciousness.
Posing the original question activates an attractor. The answer lies within its harmonic. This is why it is said that the question and the answer are merely 2 sides of one coin, and that one cannot pose a question unless the answer already exists. Otherwise, there would be no pattern from which the question could be formulated.
So again, if you ask a question, the answer exists. Because where did the question come from? It came from a pattern. It came from an attractor field. And that attractor field already has the answer. Because nothing is hidden, right? Everything just is. So there's another book I'm just reading, Immortal Talks. In that also they're talking about the same thing. That everything is existing. What are you focusing your attention on? That is where you will find yourself, right? So again, over here also, if you're asking the question, the solution already exists. Otherwise, you would not be asking the question.
Recognized geniuses may be rare, but genius resides within all of us. There is no such thing as luck or accident in this universe. And not only is everything connected to everything else, but no one is excluded from the universe. We are all members. Consciousness is a universal quality, like the quality of physicality. Because genius is a characteristic of consciousness. Genius also is universal. That which is universal is available to every man.
So again, nothing is hidden. Let me tell you, if you start raising your level of consciousness, then everything will start to unfold for you. For example, someone who works in a paper factory, right? Now, if you put a piece of paper in his hand, he's going to be able to tell you the quality of paper, the thickness of paper, the GSM of the paper, and all sorts of things about the paper just by seeing and feeling the paper. Now, how can he do that? Because he is connected with that. He is resonating with the field of paper. So he has enough information about it. Now, because we don't have enough information about it, you put a piece of paper in our hand, we are not going to be able to discern that information. So again, as you grow in consciousness, nothing is hidden. The moment you pay attention, everything becomes available to you. That's the basic game of nature. And everyone can access it. Let me tell you, it is not that only one person can do it. Every one of us can do all these things, right? Yes, you may have a propensity for it. You may have a vibratory field pattern within yourself or an attractor field pattern within yourself, which allows you to do something better and something not as well, right? But ultimately, if someone really desires it and focuses their attention, one can do everything. Nothing is hidden to anyone.
The processes of creativity and genius are inherent in human consciousness. Inasmuch as every human has within himself the same essence of consciousness, genius is a potential that resides within everyone. It awaits only the right circumstance to express itself. Each of us has had moments of genius in our lifetime, perhaps only known to ourselves or those close to us. We suddenly make a brilliant move or decision or say exactly the right thing at the right moment without quite knowing why. Sometimes we would like to congratulate ourselves for these fortuitous events, but in truth, we really do not know from whence they come.
So again, so this is what we are talking about, spontaneity. Okay. Being in the flow, saying yes. We are constantly talking about all this. Now, the genius is there in all of us, right? We have to step out of the way. That means a small guy has to step out of the way of the big guy to allow things to manifest, allow the genius to come in. And let me tell you, each one of us has it in us. The moment you start connecting, you start letting go of your normal thinking process, you start emptying your mind, which happens so beautifully in the programs, that your stillness comes into the mind, you automatically start becoming more aware and stuff starts to happen, right? So here we come to the four S's that we keep talking about from the Gita thing. The four S's means uh, the four S's means that first is swata. What does swata mean? It comes by itself. This is exactly what he's talking about here. You say the right thing at the right time. You do the right thing at the right time without thinking about it. It happens automatically. So the first S is what he's talking about over here. Swata.
Genius is often expressed through a change of perception, a change of context or paradigm. The mind struggles with an insoluble problem, poses a question, and is open to receive an answer.
So now this becomes important. Okay, over here, what is he saying? That genius often is the result of change in perspective. So the moment we change our perspective, we get or we connect to a higher attractor field. Provided when we use the example of a magnet, when I bring north and north together, they'll repel, right? If I change my perspective and turn the magnet around and north and south come in front of each other, they'll attract and the field will become better. So we have to see where our perspective shift is taking us. If it is taking us into a higher attractor field, automatically genius will start to flow.
The source from which this answer comes has been given many names, varying from culture to culture and time to time. In the arts of Western civilization, it has traditionally been identified with the Greek goddesses of inspiration called the Muses.
So we've been doing some meditations also where they say, connect with your muse. Okay. So all of us have different muse. You could say helping spirits. In shamanism, they would become helping spirits. In Hinduism, they would be our devis and devtas who you connect with. So you're connecting with them and asking them to help you achieve what is your potential.
Those who are humble and grateful for illumination received continue to have the capacity to access genius. Those who arrogate the inspiration to their own ego soon lose this capacity or are destroyed by their success. High power, like high voltage, must be handled with respect.
So again, the genius or this download is the domain of the big guy. If the small guy starts to think that he or she is doing it, then you will get a whack in your backside. Okay, very, very clearly. It is something beyond your ego. As soon as you become egoistic with all this, you lose the ability. Why? Because it's not the domain of the ego. It's not the domain of the small guy. The small guy actually can't do it. The small guy is just accessing what the big guy is receiving. So we have to understand that it is not us who is doing it. There is a genius, there is something at the back which is allowing us to observe something and then maybe verbalize it. So in all these spiritual concepts, let me tell you, okay, anything that takes us into a higher state of consciousness, into the higher levels of consciousness as per David Hawkins' list of consciousness, humility, compassion, love, all these things have to come into the picture. As soon as arrogance comes in, you fall into the lower category, below 200. Okay, and respect is very important. We have to give a lot of respect to this ability. If you start becoming arrogant about it, it's gone.
Genius and creativity, then, are subjectively experienced as a witnessing. It is a phenomenon which bypasses the individual self or ego. The capacity to finesse genius can be learned, though often only through painful surrender. When the phoenix of genius arises out of the ashes of despair after a fruitless struggle with the unsolvable. Out of defeat comes victory, out of failure, success, and out of humbling, true self esteem.
So again, most of the time when we are even in the workshops, right, when we are going into these higher states of consciousness, we tell people to observe, to witness what is happening during the exercise. Do not start analyzing during the exercise, because where do we analyze from? We analyze from the small guy. Where do we notice from? Where are we witnessing from? It is from the big guy. Yes, the small guy is involved, but we are witnessing what is coming from the big guy and we are not getting involved with it, right? So again, as soon as you start analyzing, the ego starts to kick in and you will stop the witnessing. You will stop the experiencing, right? Now, when does this normally happen? When you surrender, right? You surrender the small guy and you stop the analysis, you drop the ego. That is when it starts to really manifest in your life. And this is something that I've seen with aura photography also. I think I mentioned it yesterday, that people who are very sick and they surrender to that divine intervention, they many times start getting well because they've let go. They're not attempting to control the situation. They are allowing what needs to manifest to manifest. So this becomes very important. The witness, being having the ability to witness what is happening. And that's why the stillness of the mind becomes necessary. And this example I keep using, if I throw a pebble in a sea in storm, nothing's going to happen. If I throw a pebble in a still pond, everything will happen. So that's why stilling the mind, if you want to get into witness consciousness, then stilling the mind becomes extremely important.
One of the problems in attempting to understand genius is that it takes near genius to recognize it. The world frequently fails to identify genius altogether. Society often gives to acclaim toward the weak of genius without noting the intrinsic genius of its creation itself. Until one acknowledges the genius within oneself, one will have great difficulty recognizing it in others. We can only see without that which we realize within.
So now, see, this is very common, when two highly spiritual people come together, they can just sit together for hours without uttering a word because exchange of information takes place in the field, right? So, how will you recognize someone who's operating at a higher level of consciousness unless you are close to that level of consciousness, or you are absolutely open to connect with that level of consciousness? So, your awareness is what allows you to experience the experience. And if you're not operating out of that awareness or that level of consciousness, you are not going to be able to perceive it because it's beyond your range of perception. For example, our ears, we can hear sounds from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. Now, if something is beyond that range, we will not even perceive it, but it's there, right? So someone who can perceive at a higher range or their hearing capacity is higher will be able to hear that sound, right? So it's the same thing. We need to raise our level of consciousness to be able to understand that level of consciousness. And that is why I think these processes that we are doing, right? I'm not saying that this is the end all and for all. There are many other processes in the world which allow us to experience these. That's why learning, keeping on doing something new becomes very important because that's what allows us to grow.
In recent times, as an example, Mikhail Gorbachev has been the subject of enormous worldwide attention, but the world does not really acknowledge his genius. Single handed, in only a few short years, he completely revolutionized one of the greatest empires on earth. His only sources of power, his inspiration and vision. Had the communist regime been based on power, nothing could have overturned it. Because it was based on force, it was destined to come to an end under the hand of a charismatic leader aligned with power.
So again, whenever you align to a higher power, at the end of the day, you will always succeed. Okay, force will always fail in front of power.
Genius is one of the greatest untapped resources of our society. It is no more specific than it is personal. People of great gifts not infrequently have multiple talents. A genius may be a genius in different realms and might have answers to a diversity of problems. Society suffers a great loss because it does not know how to nurture its geniuses. They don't cost much to maintain. The source of genius is impersonal, and true genius is seldom interested in money or fame. But society, in fact, is often either indifferent or hostile to genius. The
So
lifestyle of
again, so most of the geniuses are not recognized. And because they come up with revolutionary ideas, they are often debunked while they are living. For example, Robert Monroe, according to me, never got his due. The way the stuff can really work is so phenomenal that he didn't get his due. Most of the other geniuses who really created a lot of stuff, right? Their labs were burnt, they were ostracated. You had the witch hunts in medieval Europe. What was that? These people were actually geniuses. They were going into altered state and getting healing remedies for people, or giving foresight to people, giving information to people, and they were burnt as witches. So always, when a genius is someone who stands out, and many times they will be punished for it by the normal people.
the lifestyle of those whom we term genius is typically simple. Genius is characterized by an appreciation for resources and the economy of ingenuity, because the genius values life and sees the intrinsic worth of all its expressions. Inasmuch as time and resources are precious, doing more than necessary is viewed as a waste. Therefore, people of genius often lead very quiet lives and reluctantly sally forth only when there is a cause that must be supported.
So again, geniuses will live very frugally. They will not like to waste resources because they value resources. They will not like to come in front. They will not be operating out of ego that I did this and I did that and this and that. You'll find they'll be very quiet. They'll be sitting in one place, but they are the power behind everything that is happening, right? So you have to be very, very observant to observe who the geniuses, because they don't come in the front so easily.
There is no need to get when you already have. Genius, because it is in touch with an endless source of supply, experiences only a minimum of need. Such simplicity seems a common characteristic of true success in general. The basis of this materiality, this seems nevet, is a radical understanding of the nature of the universe itself. That which supports life is supported by life. Survival is thus effortless, and giving and receiving are one and the same thing.
So the geniuses are normally in the flow. They get what they need and they give what they need to give, right? So there is no calculation, there is no mathematics, right? They just give freely and the universe gives to them freely.
Genius is notoriously interpreted as unconventionality or eccentricity. It is true that persons of genius, because of their alignment with high energy attractors, have a different perspective on life. Therefore, things have a different significance for them. The genius is frequently inspired to intense activity by insights beyond our understanding.
So again, they have a very different way of looking at things, right? And once they get after something, they can be like a bulldog, right? Because it's coming from inspiration. And they know that that inspiration really will lead to growth. It will lead to something enormous for them. So they get after their lux, they get their goals as a download. Okay, and they relentlessly go after their goals. This is again a basic nature of a genius. They will relentlessly go after something.
Genius is not stardom. Those of genius who attain prominence are a very small minority. There remains a legion of geniuses who achieve no such status. Many appear in no way noteworthy and may, in fact, have never had formal higher education. What characterizes this type is the capacity to utilize exhaustively what experience they have and to capitalize on it by the dedication necessary to reach a high degree of mastery. Many very productive geniuses are not recognized until years after they are dead. In fact, the gift or curse of genius often brings about unfortunate consequences during an individual's lifetime.
So again, they really get after what they do with total dedication. This is another fact of geniuses. They will be single-minded in what they are up to. Okay, so this becomes again very important.
One characteristic of genius is the capacity for great intensity, often expressed in cyclic form. When inspired, the person of genius may work 20 hours a day to realize a solution while it is still fresh in mind. These periods of intense activity are interspersed with periods of apparent status, which are in actuality intervals of fermentation, a necessary part of the creative process. Therefore, the personality of genius sometimes seems to incorporate polar extremes. Geniuses understand the need for creating a space for ideas to crystallize. The stage is often set by complete distraction. Creativity occurs under appropriate inner, not outer circumstances. We all know stories of people who have gotten the answers to complex problems while sitting in traffic on the freeway.
So again, you will find that people of genius, they will have an enormous burst of effort and suddenly they'll stop everything, right? They'll suddenly start doing something else and then they will come back. So this is also what happens when we are growing, right? We have a growth stage and then we come to a plateau. This plateau state is very important because from this plateau state, we can go down or we can go into the next state of growth, right? So when that intense activity is taking place, the genius is going up, and then they come to a state where they don't want to do anything because the crystallization takes place. The fermentation, as over here he is saying, takes place. The developing of and understanding of what has been in the growth, that happens in the plateau state. So the plateau state is extremely important because it can either make or break you, right? And that is what happens to geniuses. So you'll find they will do intense activity and then suddenly they'll say, no, I don't want to do anything. I want to sit in the quiet room. I want to see a movie. I just want to go and sit near the riverside. So something like that, it always happens with people who are operating at that level of genius.
A primary reason so many people fail to recognize and therefore empower their own genius is because in the popular mind, genius is confused with high IQ.
Okay, so what is high IQ? Intelligence quotient, right? It is not your ability to download. Sometimes the most dumb person, as far as normal intelligence, what we call the data-based intelligence is concerned, can be extremely powerful geniatic person, where because their creativity, their ability to solve problems comes from a higher state of consciousness. It doesn't come from the normal state of consciousness, which is based only on memory, on stuff that you have learned, that you have actually seen with your own eyes. It comes as a download. So that becomes important. In any case, EQ is now starting to become much more important than IQ. To be successful, you may not have the information now, but Google Baba gives you all the information. So why do you have to have a very high IQ? But if you don't have a good EQ, which is emotional quotient, then you will not be able to succeed because you'll not be able to interact properly at a level that is required for proper communication to take place, right? So EQ has now overtaken IQ.
This is a gross misunderstanding. It would be more helpful to see genius as simply an extraordinary high degree of savvy in a given area of human activity. The misconception about IQ has arisen from the fact that many celebrated geniuses in the fields of mathematics and physics indeed have high IQs. However, in those fields, the IQ necessary to comprehend the work is a prerequisite. There are droves of non cerebral artistic geniuses, musical geniuses, designers, and inventors. Geniuses in many fields whose talent is that of innovative creativity within a certain limited area.
So again, IQ is really confused with genius. Okay, talent. Where does that talent, that raw talent come from? It comes as a download. It comes as an inner knowing, right? Inner being. And that is what is genius. You cannot compare that with IQ. So a very good artist may not know the city which he lives in, for example, right? But he's an amazing artist. So how do you compare the two? You can't compare it.
Let us remember that IQ is merely a measure of academic capacity for logically comprehending symbols and words.
So
The
logically comprehending, left side of the brain and small guy.
The values that one lives by are more definitive of genius than IQ. From our studies, it appears that the alignment of one's goals and values with high energy attractors is more closely associated with genius than anything else. Genius can be more accurately identified by perseverance, courage, concentration, enormous drive, and absolute integrity. Talent alone is not enough.
So again, we read the book, right? The four agreements. So I have it written here. What were the four tenets of four agreements? Being impeccable with your word. Do not take things personally. Make no assumptions and do your best. Right? Now, today, if you see what he's saying over here, any genius will imbibe these four qualities. What he says here, more accurately identified by perseverance, that is doing your best. Courage, again, doing your best and not taking things otherwise. With consciousness, enormous drive, and absolute integrity, being impeccable with your word, right? So all those four tenets that we read in four agreements are, any genius will automatically have them. Talent is not enough.
Dedication of an unusual degree is required to achieve mastery. And in the simplest definition, one could say that genius is the capacity for an extraordinary degree of mastery in one's calling. A formula followed by all geniuses, prominent or not, is do what you like to do best and do it to the very best of your ability.
So again, we come to Ikigai, right? What are the four tenets of Ikigai? You are passionate about what you do, so you like what you do. You are good at it, so you do it the best, right? Again, Ikigai is, it's something that the world needs and you can be paid for. So today, if you find your Ikigai, you are getting close to becoming a genius in the field that you are working in.
Surviving success.
Chapter 16.
Chapter 16. The tragic careers of many individuals of genius subsequent to being discovered and celebrated by the public illustrate that there is success and then there is success. The farmer frequently jeopardizes life, while the latter enhances it. True success enlivens and supports the spirit. It has not to do with isolated attainments, but being successful as a total person, attaining a successful lifestyle that benefits not only yourself, but everyone around you. Successful people's lives are empowered throughout by the context of their accomplishments.
So now over here, a person who is a true success will have this, attaining a lifestyle that benefits not only the individual, but everyone around them, right? So again, one of the four tenets, the world needs it. So what are we saying here? That a truly successful person will take people with them. They are not going to be above people. So when you have success, you are raising the bar for yourself, but you're not carrying people with you. A true genius, a true person who's operating, again, when you see spiritual people, they'll always take people with them. They're not wanting to get ahead of anyone, because that is where the ego starts to come in the picture.
In contradistinction, that which the tabloid world calls success often erodes the successful person's health and relationships. Spiritual collapse is commonplace in the lives of the rich and famous.
So this is extremely important. When you get very successful from the small guy state of consciousness, it ultimately leads to a lot of problems, right? A truly successful person has success which is holistic. It is not related to only one aspect of your life. You have to see all the aspects. Like, so now if you look at your hand, we always say that there are 5 aspects to your life: your family life, your personal life, your work life, your spiritual life, and your social life. When all these combine together powerfully, that is when we have power, right? But you're very high in social life, but the other 4 are flapping around, then you will never be happy. So you have to have all around growth in your state of consciousnesses to be happy. So the success that we label as success is actually not really success. Okay, you have to be very clear and precise about this.
But what the world calls success is merely celebrity, and the capacity of celebrity to destroy is documented daily. Famous people constantly succumb to failed marriages, addiction, alcoholism, and suicide or other untimely death. If we listed the names of all the celebrities whose careers were blighted by such tragedies, it would fill a score of pages. The movie stars Judy Garland, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, the pop stars Elvis Presley, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, the writers Poe, London, Hemingway, and F. Scott Fitzgerald. The list goes on and on. In addition to such notorious examples of the price of celebrity are the uncounted thousands of less famous, successful lives ruined by drug problems or the twisting of personality, whereby formerly decent folk become vain, cruel, self centered, and inordinately self indulgent.
So again, when you have that success, which is normally termed as success, you tend to become arrogant, you start indulging, you do not care for people around you, right? And then it leads to your downfall. So we have to be very clear and careful about what we label as success.
It is not just that such people have gotten too much wealth, too much fame, or too much attention, but that these influences distorted their egos and reinforced what might be called the small self instead of the big self. The small self is the part of us that is vulnerable to flattery. The self is an aspect of our more evolved nature, which is humble and grateful for success. The self aligns with weak attractor patterns. The self is aligned with high power energy fields.
So what he's talking about, what we are labeling as the small guy and the big guy. The big guy is always associated with higher attractor patterns, higher level of consciousness. The small guy gets associated with the lower levels of consciousness. That's why the word that we are constantly saying, what is the level of consciousness that you're operating from, becomes so paramount. It is so important that it is not funny, right? We must be constantly observing as to what level of consciousness are we operating from.
Whether it uplifts or destroys us depends not upon success itself, but how it is integrated into our personalities. Whether we are proud or humble, whether we are egoistic or grateful, whether we deem ourselves better than others because of our talents or consider them a gift for which we are thankful. These are the determining factors.
So again, it depends on your perspective. Whatever the situation may be, and if you look at all that has been given here, right, you will find that the person who's aligning with the big guy is always operating on the right side of the grid. So whether we deem ourselves better than others because of our talent or consider them our gift for which we are thankful, right? So now if we consider ourselves better than others, we are always on the left side. When we consider what we have got a gift, we are on the right side because gratitude is coming into it, right? Appreciation and gratitude are the two things which will definitely take you into the right side of the grid.
We all know people for whom even a bit of success is corrupting, who become arrogant, officious, and controlling when given a little authority. And we all know people of much greater authority who are cordial, sensitive, and caring.
So again, you'll find that truly great people will always be cordial to people around them. So observe a person, how that person is talking to a person at a lower status than them. How do they talk to the driver? How are they talking to the staff? How are they talking to people who are helping them or serving them, right? Do they step out to help someone else in need? Or they are constantly looking at their own self-indulgent thing? This becomes a very powerful indicator as to what state of consciousness a person is operating from.
When we come to know the powerful men of the world, captains of industry, presidents of banking firms, Nobel Prize winners, and members of legendary American families. It is striking to see how many are open, warm, sincere, and view success as a responsibility, noblesse oblige.
So again, you are successful. You treat it as a responsibility because you've got something like, in the thing says, with great power comes great responsibility. In so many movies, they say, right? So if you're operating from power, you understand the responsibility that you're also carrying. So you're aware of that responsibility. You will not get egoistic because you know that you have to do a lot more if you have more power. But a person who's operating from the lower states of consciousness, a little bit of power will make them headstrong. They will start demeaning people and doing all sorts of things to people.
These are truly successful people, notably courteous and considerate to all, whether visiting potentates or servants, treating everyone as an equal. The truly successful have no inclination to act arrogantly because they consider themselves not better, but more fortunate than others. They see their position as a stewardship, a responsibility to exercise their influence for the greatest benefit of all.
So again, they treat themselves as trustees, that because I've got this asset, I've got this power, I've got this abundance, I need to treat it with respect. I am only a trustee. I am not the owner, right? The concept of ownership goes away. These people actually start operating from the trustee bhav, okay? From that bhav where we have to look after this for the greater good.
What allows the truly successful to be so gracious, open, and giving can be explained through our formula of causality.
So when you see a truly successful person, they are connected with A, B, C, which is the top line, right? It manifests into A to B to C, right? They are not in the A to B to C, but when you're operating from the small guy, you are in the A to B to C. You're not in the A, B, C.
The truly successful identify with the A to B to C. They realize that they are a channel acted through to create success in the outer world.
So one second. The truly successful, I identify with A, B, C, not with A, B to B to C. Okay. They identify with A, B, C. It's wrongly given over there.
Inasmuch as they identify with the source of success, they have no anxiety about losing it. But a person who views his success in the realm of A to B to C will always be insecure because its source is out there.
So again, where are you coming from? What is the state of consciousness that you're operating from? You see, the first generation person generally is never afraid to lose anything. Why? Because they have made it, right? Now, if you have not made it, then there is always a fear of losing it. So that fear puts you on the left side of the grid. If you are not confident about your own ability, you will constantly be operating from the left side of the grid. You will constantly be operating in anxiety and in fear and insecurity.
Solid confidence comes from the knowledge that the source of success is in here. By believing that the source of power lies outside oneself, one becomes powerless and vulnerable, and therefore defensive and possessive. True success originates within, independent of external circumstances.
So again, we come back to the thing that we keep talking about, inner equanimity, centeredness, being one with yourself. The more centered you are, the less vulnerable you are, the more in harmony you are, right? But when your success is based on external factors, then you start creating problems for yourself.
The ladder of success seems to have three main steps. Initially, it is what we have that counts. Status depends upon visible signs of material wealth. As one progresses, status is afforded by what one does rather than has. At this level on the ladder, one's position and activities bring significant social status. But the attraction of social roles loses glamour as one achieves mastery and matures. It is what one has accomplished that is important. Finally, one is concerned only with what one has become as a result of life's experiences. Such people have a charismatic presence that is the outer manifestation of the grace of their inner power. In their company, we feel the effect of the powerful attractor energy patterns with which they are aligned and which they reflect. Success comes as the automatic consequence of aligning one's life with high power and energy patterns.
So first it's the material, right? Then it's the doing, and ultimately it is the being. So where are you operating from? What is the status of your being is ultimately the game that we are all wanting to play.
Why is true success so relatively effortless? It might be likened to the magnetic field created by an electric current running through a wire. The higher the power of the current, the greater the magnetic field that it generates. And the magnetic field itself then influences everything in its presence.
So what are we talking about? We keep saying become the bigger magnet. Now, if you are becoming the bigger magnet, then you will automatically start influencing the smaller magnets. So that is the important thing here. Bring that equanimity into yourself so that you can become the bigger magnet. The example there here that the higher the power, the higher the magnetic field. So as we start aligning ourselves to higher states of consciousness, automatically we start becoming the bigger magnet.
There are very few at the top. The world of the mediocre, however, is one of intense competition, and the bottom of the pyramid is crowded. Charismatic winners are sought out. Losers have to strive to be accepted. People who are loving, kind, and thoughtful of others have more friends than they can count. Success in every area of life is a reflex to those who are aligned with successful patterns, and the capacity to be able to discern the difference between the strong patterns of success and the weak patterns leading to failure is now available to each of us.
So again, we need to align ourselves to the higher attractor patterns rather than the lower attractor patterns. And this is all available to us. When we are going into these higher states of consciousness, our sensitivity automatically starts to go up. And of course, we have the ring test to be able to figure out what level of consciousness that we are operating from. Okay, so I think we'll stop here.